Deep in the frozen tundra of Ice Age Europe, a lone hunter stands before a creature 10 feet tall at the shoulder, weighing 6 tons. What you're about to discover challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient human survival. Recent archaeological evidence from Siberia reveals that solitary hunters didn't just encounter mammoths by chance. They actively tracked them for weeks, studying their behavior like modern wildlife researchers. The key to their success wasn't brute strength, but an intimate understanding of mammoth psychology that took years to develop. These hunters could read the subtle signs in mammoth dung, determining not just what the animal ate, but its stress levels and reproductive state. At the Yana River site in Arctic Siberia, scientists found a 30,000-year-old hunting camp with tools specifically designed for solo mammoth hunting, a discovery that rewrote our understanding of prehistoric cooperation. The most shocking revelation? These lone hunters preferred hunting in complete darkness during the polar night, when mammoths' poor night vision gave humans an almost supernatural advantage. Ancient DNA extracted from mammoth hair found at kill sites shows that hunters targeted specific individuals they had been observing for months, not random encounters. The hunters used a technique called shadow stalking, moving in perfect synchronization with the mammoth's own shadow during twilight hours, rendering themselves nearly invisible. Archaeological evidence from the Gravettian period shows that a single hunter could carry specialized equipment weighing up to 80 pounds, including collapsible spears and portable fire-starting kits. What's truly mind-bending is that these hunters understood mammoth communication. They could mimic the infrasound calls that mammoths use to communicate across miles of tundra. At the Predmosty site in Czech Republic, researchers found evidence of a hunting technique where solo hunters would deliberately trigger small avalanches to separate young mammoths from their herds. The psychological warfare was real. Hunters would leave specific scent markers that caused anxiety in mammoths, making them more prone to mistakes. Carbon dating of mammoth remains shows that some hunts lasted not hours, but days, a deadly game of endurance where the human's ability to sweat gave them an edge in persistence hunting even in freezing temperatures. The weapons these lone hunters used were far more sophisticated than the simple spears we see in museums. Recent microscopic analysis of 25,000-year-old spear points from the Kostenki site reveals a complex poison delivery system, tiny grooves that held toxins extracted from Arctic plants that could paralyze a mammoth's nervous system within hours. These weren't quick kills. They were calculated biological warfare that required the hunter to track a poisoned mammoth for up to 3 days while it slowly weakened. The most ingenious weapon was the patience blade, a razor-sharp obsidian knife attached to a long pole that hunters used to make hundreds of small cuts on a mammoth's legs, causing gradual blood loss without triggering a charge. Forensic analysis of mammoth bones shows evidence of surgical precision. Hunters knew exactly where to strike to sever specific tendons, immobilizing the creature without killing it immediately. At the Dolny Vestanits site, archaeologists discovered clay models of mammoths with marked points indicating vulnerable spots. These were training tools used to teach the next generation of solo hunters. The hunters exploited mammoth behavior in ways that seem almost cruel by modern standards. They understood that mammoths would return to the same water sources, so they would contaminate these areas with irritants that caused temporary blindness. What's fascinating is the evidence of psychological anchoring. Hunters would wound a mammoth superficially, then follow it for days, allowing the animal's own stress hormones to weaken its immune system. Protein residue analysis on ancient tools reveals that hunters consumed small amounts of mammoth blood during the hunt, possibly believing it gave them the animal's strength, but it also provided crucial calories during multi-day pursuits. The most controversial discovery comes from the Sungir burial site, where a hunter was buried with a straightened mammoth tusk containing a detailed calendar, evidence that hunts were planned according to lunar cycles when mammoths were most vulnerable. Bone isotope analysis shows evidence that successful solo mammoth hunters had a distinct chemical signature in their skeletons, indicating a specialized diet that prepared their bodies for extreme physical stress. These hunters practiced a form of mirror hunting. They would study a specific mammoth so intensely that they could predict its movements hours in advance, essentially thinking like the animal. The kill sites reveal something disturbing. Hunters would sometimes wound a mammoth and then leave it for weeks, returning only when scavengers had weakened it further, a strategy that required mapping multiple wounded animals across vast territories. Dental analysis of hunter remains shows unusual wear patterns consistent with using teeth to grip ropes during solo mammoth hunts. Their own bodies became tools. The final approach was the most dangerous. Hunters would wait until a mammoth lay down to rest, then use that brief window to strike at the base of the skull, a technique that required getting within arm's reach of a creature that could kill them with a single movement.
The mental preparation for solo mammoth hunting was as important as the physical tools, and recent neurological studies of ancient hunter remains reveal something extraordinary. CT scans of 28,000-year-old skulls from mammoth hunters show enlarged regions of the brain associated with spatial memory and risk assessment. Their brains had literally evolved to hunt these giants. These hunters practiced a form of meditation that modern psychologists call predator consciousness, entering a mental state where fear was completely suppressed, replaced by cold calculation. Evidence from cave art shows that hunters would spend months creating detailed drawings of their target mammoth, a practice that neuroscientists now recognize as a form of visualization training used by elite athletes. The most remarkable discovery comes from residue analysis on ancient ceremonial objects. Hunters consumed psychoactive compounds from Arctic fungi before hunts, not for courage, but to enhance their ability to detect subtle environmental changes. At the Paviland Cave in Wales, researchers found a hunter's burial that included a necklace made from the ear bones of mammoths, each bone representing a successful solo kill, with one individual having killed 23 mammoths alone in his lifetime. The hunters developed a sophisticated understanding of weather patterns, knowing that mammoths became disoriented during specific atmospheric conditions that humans could navigate using star positions. Isotope analysis of mammoth tusks shows that hunters could identify sick or injured animals from miles away, possibly by detecting changes in the animal's scent carried on the wind. What's truly shocking is evidence of empathy hunting. Hunters would spend so much time observing their target that they developed an emotional connection, with some kill sites showing signs of burial rituals for the mammoth itself. The physical conditioning required was extreme. Analysis of hunter leg bones shows stress fractures that healed and refractured multiple times, indicating that these individuals regularly ran up to 30 miles per day while tracking. Ancient DNA analysis reveals that successful mammoth hunters had specific genetic variants associated with enhanced cold tolerance and the ability to metabolize fat more efficiently. They were literally genetically adapted for this lifestyle. The hunters used a technique called scent masking that involved rolling in mammoth dung and urine for days before a hunt, essentially becoming invisible to the mammoth's sense of smell. Archaeological evidence shows that hunters would create false trails and decoy camps to confuse mammoths, demonstrating an understanding of animal cognition that rivals modern behavioral science. The most disturbing aspect? Hunters would sometimes target pregnant females because they moved slower and the unborn calf provided additional nutrition, a strategy that may have contributed to mammoth extinction. Bone marrow analysis from hunter remains shows periods of extreme starvation between successful hunts, with some individuals losing up to 30% of their body weight during unsuccessful tracking periods. The aftermath of a successful solo mammoth hunt reveals the true genius of these ancient hunters and the dark price they paid. Butchering analysis shows that a lone hunter could process a 6-ton mammoth in just 48 hours using a technique called sequential harvesting, taking only the most valuable parts and returning multiple times as the carcass froze and thawed.
These hunters had an encyclopedic knowledge of mammoth anatomy. They knew that the tongue contained enough calories to sustain them for a week, and that the foot pads provided fat that wouldn't freeze even at -40 degrees. Recent excavations at the Krakow Spazista site revealed something haunting: a solo hunter's camp, where the individual had lived next to a mammoth carcass for 3 months during winter, essentially using the dead animal as shelter, food source, and fuel. The economic impact of a single mammoth kill was staggering. One animal provided enough resources to trade for tools, clothing, and social status that could sustain a hunter's family for an entire year. Genetic analysis of ancient populations shows that successful mammoth hunters had significantly more offspring than other males, creating a selection pressure that favored the traits necessary for solo hunting. But there was a dark side. Skeletal analysis reveals that mammoth hunters had a life expectancy of just 32 years, compared to 45 for other Ice Age humans, with most dying from injuries sustained during hunts. The psychological toll was immense. Some burial sites show evidence of what modern psychiatrists would recognize as PTSD, with hunters buried in fetal positions clutching mammoth ivory talismans. What's most fascinating is evidence of hunters' knowledge transfer. Older hunters who could no longer hunt alone would create detailed ivory carvings showing hunting techniques, essentially creating the world's first instruction manuals. The spiritual dimension was profound. DNA analysis shows that some hunters consumed small amounts of mammoth brain tissue, possibly believing it transferred the animal's memories and wisdom. Archaeological evidence suggests that the practice of solo mammoth hunting created an elite class of individuals who held disproportionate power in Ice Age societies, the original big game hunters who shaped human social evolution. The final mystery that haunts researchers: at several sites across Europe and Asia, we find evidence of hunters who died during successful hunts, killed by their prey even as they delivered the fatal blow. A reminder that this was never a fair fight, but a desperate gamble with death. Modern experimental archaeology has attempted to recreate these hunts using period-accurate tools, and every attempt has failed, suggesting that these ancient hunters possessed skills and knowledge that died with them. The legacy of solo mammoth hunting lives on in our DNA. Recent genetic studies show that populations descended from these hunters have enhanced spatial reasoning and risk assessment capabilities, traits that may have contributed to human success in colonizing the planet. As the last mammoths disappeared 4,000 years ago, so too did this extraordinary chapter of human capability, a time when a single human, armed with nothing but knowledge, patience, and courage, could bring down the largest land animal of the Ice Age.